Mrudanga Badya Sunite Mana Abasara Sada Jache Gaura Vihita Kirtana Soni Anande Hrodaya Nache Jugala Murti Dekhiya Mora Paramananda Hoya Prasada Seva Korite Hoya Sakala Prapancha Jaya Jedina Gruhe Bhajana Dekhi Gruhete Goloka Bhaya Charana Sidhu Dekhiya Ganga Sukhana Sima Paya Tulasi Dekhi Jurai Prana Madhava Toshani Jani Gaura Priya Sakasevane Jivana Sarthaka Mani Bhakti Vinoda Krishna Bhajane Anukula Paya Jaha Pratidivase Parama Sukhe Svikara Koro Yeta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jai Gauranitai. Jaya Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Madan Mohan, Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladev, Jaya Subhadra. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribol, 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 Haribol. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharyya Stotra Sata Shri Srimadi's Divine Grace Labai Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharyya Stotra Sata Shri Srimadi's Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namachar Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जाए। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जाए। ब्रजभूमि श्री वृंदावन धाम की जाए। नवद्वीप श्री मायपुर धाम की जाए। पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जाए। गंगा माँ यमुना माई की जाए। वृंद देवी तुलसी महारानी की जाए। श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जाए। श्रील प्रभुपाद ट्रांसेंडेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की जाए। The most merciful Lordship Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan Ji ki jai. The most merciful Lordship Shri Shri Gaunitai ki jai. The most merciful Lordship Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai. Shri Ekadasi Vrata ki jai. Samaveta Gaur Bhakta Bunda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Lilamritam ki jai. Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation of the song. Dust from the lotus feet of pure devotees is conducive to devotional service, while service to the Vaishnavas is itself the supreme perfection and the root of the tender creeper of divine love. I observe with great care the holy days like Ekadashi and Janmashtami, for they are the mother of devotion. As my dwelling place, I choose with the greatest of reverence and love the transcendental abode of Sri Krishna. All those places where my Lord Gaurasundara traveled for pastimes, I will visit in the company of loving devotees. My mind always begs for the opportunity to hear the music of the mridanga. Upon hearing the kind of the kirtan ordained by Lord Gaurachandra, my heart dances in ecstasy. By beholding the deity forms of the divine couple, Sri Sri Radha Krishna, I feel the greatest joy. By honoring the Lord's prasad, I conquer over all worldly illusions. Goloka Vrindavan appears in my home whenever I see the worship and service of Lord Hari going on there. Upon seeing the Ganges, which is a river of nectar emanating from the lotus feet of my Lord, my happiness knows no bounds. The sight of the holy Tulsi tree soothes my soul, for I know she gives pleasure to Lord Krishna. By honoring Shak, a green leafy vegetable preparation, a dear favorite of Lord Chaitanya, I consider life worthwhile. Whatever Bhaktivinoda obtains that is conducive for the service to Sri Krishna, he accepts every day with the greatest of joy. Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Is this the one? So we are reading today's Ekadashi. So we are reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamritam, Volume 3. Only He Could Lead Them, San Francisco, India, 1967. Chapter 3, New Jagannath Puri. Srila Prabhupada put on a sweater over his turtleneck jersey, wrapped his chadar around his shoulders, and left his apartment, accompanied by a few disciples. The weather was beautiful, and the blue, cloudless sky reminded him of India. An hour before, he had sent devotees ahead to start a kirtan, and now one of the girls had come running back to him, excitedly knocking on his door and announcing, Swamiji, there are so many people. The clay mridangas he had ordered many months ago from Calcutta had recently arrived. Today would be one of the first times he would play a genuine clay mridanga in America. The boys and girls would like it. He had arranged for the drums to be wrapped in cloth and had cautioned the boys to be careful because the clay drums broke easily. The walk to the park was short, and as usual, Prabhupada walked faster than his young followers. They walked down Frederick Street to Stanyan, where they turned the corner at the Duff Nut shop, frequented by the Hells Angels and still sometimes visited by certain devotees. On Stanyan, they hurried past the parking lot of Kejar Stadium, the stadium itself looming beyond. At the Vallon Street intersection, Prabhupada continued his rapid stride without stopping or even bothering to look at the light. One of the boys caught his arm. Wait, Swamiji, the light. But Prabhupada darted across the street. As they continued down, Stanyan toward Haight Street, the park appeared on the right. They entered, walking past a duck pond with a fountain and a willow tree on its center island. They walked past tall redwood and eucalyptus trees, which lent fragrance to the surrounding area. There were also maple, oak, and ash trees and flowering shrubs like azaleas. Prabhupada said that the park resembled parks in Bombay and that the city was like a holy place because it was named after St. Francis. They entered a 50-foot long tunnel with artificial stalactites hanging from the ceiling and came out onto a path heavily shaded by trees on either side. Just ahead was the meadow covered with tiny daisies and clovered and encircled by redwood and eucalyptus trees. Prabhupada could hear the chanting, the karatals, and the booming of the uh, timpani. As he entered the meadow, he saw a sloping hill dotted with hundreds of young people sitting, lying, longing, lounging, smoking, throwing frisbees, or walking around. And in the meadow, below the hall, was his kirtan. The meadow was a popular place. People walked through it on the way to the Jew or the tennis courts. But today, many passers by had stopped and were listening to a group about 200 feet from the kirtan. Closer in, about 50 feet from the kirtan, was another group listening more intently. And then there was the kirtan party itself, Prabhupada's disciples and dozens of young hippies sitting tightly together and chanting. And others were standing nearby, clapping and swaying to the rhythm of the drum and karatals. Flags decorated the kirtan area, 3 feet by 4 feet. They had been made by the devotees, and each bore the symbol of a different religion. A bright red flag with a yellow star and the crescent moon of Islam flew from a 10-foot bamboo pole stuck into the earth. Beside it waved a pale blue flag with a dark blue star of David in the center. And besides that, a yellow flag bore the Sanskrit Omkara. Prabhupada's disciples, with their long hair and casual clothes, were indistinguishable from the other young dancers and singers except for the strand of large red chanting beads around their necks. Some of the devotees danced with arms upraised against the background of uninterruptible blue sky. Others played instruments. The karatals and timpani were there. Hayagriva had brought his cornet, and there were other instruments brought by devotees and hippies. Little children were taking part. Even a stray dog pranced in the innermost circle of the Kirtan party. On Sundays, the meadow beneath Hippie Hill was always an open show, and today the Kirtan was the featured attraction. Prabhupada joined the Kirtan, walking up suddenly to the surprise and delight of the devotees. He sat down and began playing the mridanga and leading the singers in a loud voice. Mukunda. Although we had heard Swamiji play different drums before, and some of us had played along with him, when he played the clay mridanga from India, it was a completely different feeling. The feeling it created was akin to seeing an old friend after many, many years. It was so right and so natural. It was the very thing our kirtan had been missing. And it increased our feeling of ecstasy many times over. Obviously, Swamiji was in greater ecstasy than ever. You could sense by the way he held the drum, by the ease with which he brought out its intricate rhythms to control the kirtan, that this drum was like a long lost friend to him. Swamiji playing the drum was the talk of the community. Now we knew what kirtan really was, how it was supposed to sound, what it was really like. Prabhupada was the center of attraction. Even his age and dress made him prominent, whereas the others in the park were mostly young people dressed in denims or various hippie costumes. Prabhupada was 70 and distinctly dressed in saffron robes. And the way the devotees had all cheered and bowed before him and were now looking at him so lovingly caused onlookers to regard him with curiosity and respect. As soon as he had sat down, some young children had gathered in close to him. He had smiled at them, deftly playing the mridanga, enthralling enthralling and entertaining them with his playing. Govinda Dasi. With Swamiji's arrival, there was a mastery and an authority about the whole kirtan that was absent before. We were no longer kids in San Francisco chanting Hare Krishna. Now we had historical depth and meaning. Now the kirtan had credentials. His presence established the ancient historical quality of the chanting. When Swamiji came, the whole disciplic succession came. After an hour of chanting, Prabhupada stopped the kirtan and addressed the crowd. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is the sound vibration, and it is to be understood that the sound vibration is transcendental. And because it is transcendental vibration, therefore it appeals to everyone, even without understanding the language of the sound. This is the beauty. Even children respond to it. After speaking 5 minutes, Prabhupada began the kirtan again. One woman with long, uncombed red hair began dancing back and forth and chanting, her baby in her arms. A man and woman sitting side by side played together on the heads of a pair of bongos. Subala, in tight corduroy pants and a flowing white shirt, danced in a semblance of the steps Swamiji had shown him. Although Subala looked somewhat like an American Indian dancer, a little girl no more than 4 years old sat cross legged, playing karatals and chanting seriously. A sour looking fellow wearing vest and round sunglasses played castanets against his palm. Ravindra Swarupa sat rocking back and forth as he played the drone on the harmonium. Beside him, Hayagriva chanted forcefully, his head and upper body lunging forward and back. His long hair and beard jutting out wildly, while nearby a girl stood with her right arm around one boy and her left arm around another, all three of them swaying back and forth, singing with peaceful, blissful smiles, enjoying the chanting and the sunshine. One girl sat silently meditating, while beside her a girl danced provocatively, and a 5-year-old beside the dancing girl played with two balloons. Prabhupada set his mridanga aside and stood playing karatals and swaying among the dancers, his feet moving in a stately measure. A big black man danced nearby, facing his white girlfriend, both of them moving as if they were at the Avalon. The girl shook her body and head in wild abandon, and her long straight hair completely covered her face. Bright blonde Nandarani stood on Prabhupada's right, playing karatals. Sometimes Prabhupada stopped singing and simply observed the scene, his mouth closed in a stern yet sublimely tolerant expression. Some of the young people joined hands, forming a circle, and began to dance around and around in front of Swamiji. Then they encircled him, and as he looked on, still swaying and now clapping solemnly, they danced around him hand in hand, jumping and wriggling and chanting Hare Krishna. The soft pink hue of his khadi robes contrasting with the pied dress of the hippies, Swamiji looked unusual and wonderful, watching and solemnly sanctioning the kirtan performance. The dance was free form and sensuous. But that was the way these young people expressed their feelings. Though their bodies they bounced and bounded into the air, Sometimes the circle of dancers would break and become a single line, weaving in and out among the people sitting on on the grass and out among the silk flags. A muscular boy held the hand of a girl wearing long dark braid and a black headband in American Indian style. At the end of the line, a boy held a girl's hand with his left hand, while with his right he held a wooden recorder to his mouth and tooted as he weaved in and out of the crowd. Prabhupada became tired and sat beside the brass bottomed timpani. Singing and playing karatals, he sat grave and straight like an ancient sage. Nearby, a blonde woman sat in yogic posture, behind her body forward until her forehead touched the ground again and again in supplication or exhibition. Another girl stretched out her hands imploringly in a mixed expression of inner feelings, physical and spiritual, while her golden earrings jangled. A Mexican in a checkered shirt beat beat a tom tom. A white sheep dog wandered from person to person. Swamiji looked kind and amused. The hippies found him beautiful. He remained gentlemanly, aloof amid the twisting, shaking, rocking, dancing young people. Amid their most sensual movements, he appeared not at all like them, for he moved in a stately, elderly way. As he surveyed the activities in the meadow, he seemed deeply pleased to see the ring of dancers singing all around him, chanting Hare Krishna. Although the enthusiasm of these hippies was often wild and sensual, the gathering assumed a wholesome sweetness due to the chanting of Hare Krishna. For Swamiji, the main thing was that the chanting was going on and on. Dressed in his saffron cloth that seemed to change color subtly in the fading afternoon sunlight, he watched in a kindly, fatherly way, not imposing any restraint but simply inviting everyone to chant Hare Krishna. 25-year-old Linda Kutch was walking in the park when she heard the sound of the kirtan. In the crowd of hundreds of people gathered around the scene, Linda found it easy to go close without becoming conspicuous. She felt comfortable watching and even thought of joining the fun. Then he noticed the Swamiji leading the singing. She was startled, even a little frightened, having never before seen anyone so grave. He was striking. And the dancers appeared beautiful to her. A girl with arms upraised and eyes closed seemed to be swinging like a tree in the wind. One of the men was tall and attractive with golden curly hair, and Linda saw a boy she knew from college in New York, a crazy boy who always wore a shocking pink wool cap. Linda had arrived in San Francisco from New York only a few days ago. She had no plans except to study under a certain dance teacher and may get into some of the exciting things she had heard were going on in Haight Ashbury. As a graduate student in ancient Greek literature at Columbia University, Linda had become attracted to Socrates, who had lived and died for truth. But she hadn't found any of her professors to be at all like Socrates. She had envisioned herself living a life of truth by pursuing scholarship, but it had become dry. The ancient civilization of Greece was a dead idea, not a living truth. It didn't touch the heart. She had been aching for a new, exciting experience, and she was ready to throw herself into San Francisco's hippie society. She had come here alone, giving up her fashionable clothes and donning bell bottoms and old shirts. But because she wanted to be serious, she felt awkward trying to fit in with the hippies. She felt that to belong, she was supposed to wipe the serious look off her face and just smile mindlessly. So, even in the society of San Francisco hippies, she remained unsatisfied and lost. The kirtan in a park was the most beautiful sight Linda had ever seen. The dancers were swaying back and forth, their arms raised against the open sky, and in the middle of the dance was a dark, gray haired, wise person sitting and chanting. As she moved in closer, she began to sway with the devotees. Then she sat down and started chanting, wanting to find out what was going on. After more than an hour of chanting, the elderly leader finally stopped the kirtan and Linda began talking to some of the devotees. Although the Swami had slipped away, some of his followers had remained, handing out flyers and invitations to the Sunday love feast and picking up the timpani and the flags. One of them asked her to come with them to the temple. Linda found the devotees to be something like hippies, but not scurfy street people like most of the hippies she had met. They were attractive, not repellent. Madrasas and plants, uh, madrasas and plants decorated their little storefront temple. When she stopped before a painting of people singing and dancing, one of the devotees said, "This is Lord Chaitanya and his associates." A devotee gave her some prasadam, and Linda left that night without meeting the Swami. The next day, however, at 7 in the morning, she returned, eager for another chance to see him. She thought he had noticed her at the park and might remember her. She had made a drawing of him and she wanted to show him. That morning, as Prabhupada chanted prayers and led kirtan, Linda didn't take her eyes off him. And when he asked everyone to chant Hare Krishna with him on beads, she excitedly accepted a stand from one of the devotees and tried to chant like him. Then he began reading the Sanskrit verse to begin his lecture, and Linda was captivated by the sound. If she were to continue with her graduate program in Greek, she would study Sanskrit next. So she listened with keen interest, proud that perhaps no one else in the room could understand as well as she. Later that same morning, she met Srila Prabhupada upstairs in his apartment. Linda, in the first conversation I had with him, Swamiji summed up Greek civilization for me in a couple of sentences. He explained that Srimad Bhagavatam was the source of stories like the Iliad and the Odyssey and was the source of Platonic philosophy. I was thrilled. Of course, I believed him. I knew that whatever he was speaking was the truth. There was no doubt in my mind, and he didn't discourage my love for Socrates. He told me that Socrates was actually a devotee in disguise. Then he began telling me the story of Krishna's, the butter thief, and said, oh yes, I know that story. I saw a dance about Krishna as the butter thief. He was very pleased, and he laughed, and he said, oh yes, you know. This encounter with Swamiji was like meeting an old friend because I felt completely at home and protected, and I felt I had found what I was looking for. Here I could use my intelligence and ask the questions I had always wanted to ask in school. Prabhupada initiated Linda, giving her the name Lilamritam. Seeing her eagerness to serve him personally, he decided to teach her to cook by having her prepare his lunch. He already had a little weekend cooking class in which he taught Janaki, Govindadasi, Nandarani, and others the art of cooking for Krishna. Now he invited Leelavati to come. He could walk back and forth in the small room, showing the girls how to knead dough, cook chapatis, measure spices in the right palm, and cut vegetables and cook them in a ghee with masala. The foods were basic: rice, chapatis, cauliflower with potatoes. But he wanted to teach the girls precisely how to cook. Mukunda. One day, just out of curiosity, I went in to witness Swamiji's cooking classes. So I came in and stood at the doorway to Swamiji's kitchen. The women were there learning how to cook, and Swamiji said to me, "What are you doing?" Oh, I said, "I just came to see my wife." Then Swamiji said, "Are you going back to Godhead or back to wife?" Everyone was amused, and I realized I wasn't welcome, so I left. The incident made me reflect on Swamiji's seriousness. For one thing, I learned that I should not be so attached to my wife. And secondly, I learned that his relationship with the women and what he was teaching them was actually very sacred, not like the sometimes frivolous association between husband and wife. Because he spent many hours in the kitchen teaching them, they were very inspired. Leelavati tended to be proud. Many of the devotees were not college graduates, and none of them were classical scholars. She sometimes typed for Swamiji, did his wash, or brought flowers to his room in the morning, and he had quickly chosen her to be his exclusive cook. After only a few days of cooking lessons, Swamiji had told her, "All right, you cook." And now he came in only occasionally to check on her. Once, when he saw her rolling chapatis, he said, "Oh, you have learned very nicely." Preparing Swamiji's meals just right with the proper spicing without burning anything and on time was a challenge. By the time Lilavati finished, she would be perspiring and even crying from tension. But when she brought in his lunch, he would ask her to bring an empty plate, and he would serve her portions from his own plate and invite her to eat with him. For the first few days, Leelavati made remarks about the wonderful tastes of the prasadam, and Swamiji would smile and raise his eyebrows. But then she noticed that he never spoke while eating, but seemed to be concentrating intensely as he sat cross legged, bending his body over the plate of prasadam and eating with his right hand. One day, on Ekadashi, Leelavati arrived late at Swamiji's apartment, thinking there would not be much cooking on a fast day. But when she entered the kitchen, she found Swamiji himself busily cooking. He was heating something white in a skillet, vigorously stirring and scraping it from the bottom of the pan. "Oh," he said, "I was just wondering, where is that girl?" Leelavati was too shy to ask what Swamiji was doing. So she simply busied herself cutting vegetables. "Today is a fast day," she said, as if chiding Swamiji for cooking. "You have to understand," he replied. "In Krishna consciousness, a fast day means a feast day. We are offering this to Krishna." Leelavati continued to keep her distance from Swamiji's whitish, sticky looking preparation until she completed it and said and placed it on the windowsill to cool. Later it was hardened. He said, "And we can cut it and serve it." And with that, he turned and walked out of the kitchen. When Leelavati finished cooking and served Swamiji in his Ekadasi lunch, he asked her to bring him some of that thing on the windowsill. He took a bite, seemed pleased, and asked Lilavati to call Mukunda and Janaki to taste it. Janaki took a bite and exclaimed, "It's wonderful, simply wonderful, incredible. What is this?" Turning to Lilavati, Swamiji asked, "What is in this preparation?" "I don't know, Swamiji," she said. "You don't know?" He replied. "You're standing right by me in the kitchen and you don't remember?" Lilavati's face turned red. "Oh, Swamiji," Lilavati replied, "I was very busy. I just didn't see." "Oh, you're busy without intelligence," he replied. And he laughed for a long time until Mukunda was also laughing. Lilavati felt even more humiliated. Swamiji asked Janaki if she could tell what was in the preparation. She couldn't expect that it was sweet. He then sent Lilavati downstairs to get Govindadasi and Gaurasundara. When they entered, Swamiji told Lilavati, "Go get some more of that simply wonderful thing." Again, this time in front of 4 devotees, Swamiji asked Lilavati, "So, what is in the preparation?" And again she defended herself. She had been too busy to notice. And again he laughed until everyone was laughing with him. He then asked Govindadasi to taste that simply wonderful and say what was in it. Immediately she guessed sugar, butter, and powdered milk. Oh, Swamiji looked at Lilavati. She's an artist. She's intelligent. To Lilavati, the whole episode was devastating ordeal. Only later did she understand that Swamiji had been trying to teach her humility. So we'll stop here. Srila Prabhupada Lilamritam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.